All right. Well, welcome to another session of Empowered Learning 101. We're actually starting back after the new year. So this is going to be kind of a fun refresher course, but I think it's always good to kind of come back to some basics of things that we should be doing and things that we know so that we can continue to move forward in a better position. But let's start. So this session, we're actually going to talk about to jumpstart a new year, which for many of us, we're already into it a week or two, but it always takes me a little bit of time to get going. So that's kind of going to be the topic of discussion. But before we really get into the session, we'd like to do a big shout out and a big thank you to the Idaho Freedom Action. They are helping to provide these courses, and I'm so grateful that they see value in the things that we talk about. You know, we definitely couldn't do that without their support, and we are so appreciative of them. So just a quick introduction about myself. My name is Rebecca Bchman, and I have been married to my sweetheart for like 26 years, which seems pretty incredible that it's been that long. I have 4 great kids who I actually started homeschooling on accident. I actually started with the oldest one, and he ended up graduating from a local online school as well as his brother Jacob, and then I have a daughter, Emily, who's going to a local charter school. That's what she chose to do this year. And then my 12-year-old son, Tate, I'm actually doing more of an independent thing through a like a charter school in Idaho. So I've been homeschooling, online schooling for 16 years. I'm the podcaster at theluminousmind.net. I'm really going to stay focused on these courses though, but there's a lot of great content there. And we'll be talking about some of that. I always like to do this page just in case somebody jumps on. It's really important for us to try to create these courses for your individual needs, and these are some great questions to kind of, just put them in the chat about who you are and what you need and, what your success or worry or fear or those types of things are. It's really important to know those things. I would like to introduce Dustin Hertz. He's from he's our Idaho Freedom Action representative who is monitoring the chat. Do you want to spend a minute? Exactly. I'm like, exactly. Exactly. He does. All right. Yeah. So the last session we actually it's kind of like a bookend to this session. We talked about looking forward to that new year. We talked a lot about, maybe I gave you some homework of things to do over the holiday season. But we talked a lot about changing that mindset for success, re-examining that why, because this is a good time of year to do that. I'm always grateful to live in Idaho because we have those seasons. And this is, that first quarter of the year, I think, is an important season in anybody's life. But and it's a good time to re-examine that why. Also, customizing your life and ideals. And we talked about creating a family mission statement, which we'll go over. Thankfully, during the break, I actually was on a radio program that aired in Florida, and I gave a lot of great resources there. In fact, I kept my notes here so I could kind of talk about that. So I talked about getting or looking at a Thomas Jefferson Education by Oliver DeMille, because that is a particular, even though I found it late in my homeschooling journey, it doesn't have it broken up as far as like what kids should learn, but like phases of learning, which I think is almost more powerful because we allow kids to naturally move through these phases of learning, but it's really important to know those things. So great book there. Passion Driven Education by Connor Boyax, another great resource, and Free to Learn by Peter Gray, as well as The Underground History of the American Education and Dumbing Us Down by John Taylor Grotto. Those are some great books to start with if you're kind of new on this homeschooling journey. And every time I start the year off in these courses, I just assume we're picking up more people that are new to this. One of the books, though, that I forgot to recommend, that I highly recommend, is this one that's up on the screen, The Self-Driven Child. And I've actually talked to both Bill and Ned about this book. They have another one coming out. It's direct somewhat towards teachers, definitely towards families. In this book, they talk about the cutting edge brain science, and then help you understand behavioral therapy. And they really urge parents to take more of a consultant attitude, especially the older your children get. But the great thing about this book is that they have advice and information for parents of kids of all ages. And I highly recommend it. I think that, as we talk about homeschooling our children, one of the things I mentioned on the radio was that I feel like, as I've kind of watched this whole thing over the last almost 2 decades, is that parents struggle because we've lost our ability to parent our children. And homeschooling is just an extension of parenting in a lot of ways. But because so much of it's been turned over to the state for so long, we really struggle with that. I was really sad to hear a local story here of a mother who, she's trying to get her son to listen to her and did some horrible, I don't know, basically tortured the child here. And that's what her thing was, is that she just would get frustrated with this kid, and as a way to punish him or try to get him to listen to her. And I really hope that we're all striving to be better parents more so than better homeschoolers, for sure. And that's with everything we do with the Freedom Action, we can't have a free society without strong families in a lot of ways.
That's true. Absolutely true.
Yeah. Did you have more you wanted to say about that?
No, I just, I don't know. I think sometimes we go through life on autopilot. We're just trying to survive and just get to the next day. And some days you'll have to do that. But I just came to the realization that what we do matters a lot. I mean, and it sounds
really?
it sounds so simple, but what we do matters. The little decisions that we make every day, how we treat our kids, will have consequences far into the future. Sometimes these are generational consequences.
And it affects all society, not only our own family, but for good or bad in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And so I just think, we'll get more into this, but just being patient, being loving with your kids, encouraging them so that then they feel loved and they can radiate that love out to others, whether it's, in the church, the community, and in government. We certainly need more of that in government, where we're respectful and civil with each other.
Yeah.
But
Definitely.
firm with our boundaries. But that's another. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox, but you're absolutely right on 100%.
I'm going to let you take that over at the very end for sure. So we want to do a follow-up on the homework. We talked about really thinking about your why and maybe reassessing that, talking with your family. These are some things that we talked about that last session. Also, what is your family's why? I really think that that's important for everyone to figure out, because when times get tough, when that daily grind gets tough, it's important to go like, why are we doing this, for sure. And then also thinking about that mission statement and that family goal setting. I don't know, Dustin, did you work on a family mission statement at all,
No,
or
we
any
didn't.
goals at all?
We didn't, but
Okay.
we actually have started the goal setting process. My kids were not super duper excited about it, but we're doing it. So,
Well, yeah, and really Christmas time, even though we talked about it, a couple sessions back, try to stay on that schedule and stuff. You always find yourself getting off pace. And sometimes it's just like you're just kind of handling the holiday stuff. So really, I think this is a really important time. The next few weeks in January is when we can really kind of reassess those things and take advantage of it, for sure. And that's why I always like to kind of restart the year with this type of stuff. Like we said, we are going to talk about how to jumpstart the new year. We're going to examine our family's needs, our family learning, goal setting, and then also creating a plan for success. Kind of, like I said, snowballing off of that, the end of the year one that we talked about. The resource page, there's some of a repeat from last session, but definitely that family mission statement, take a look at that. There's it has great resources there of how to do it and how to make it successful. That worksheet is a great way to get started. And then also your family goals and how that will make life easier as a parent, and then also how to do that. When Dustin was talking about, he has young kids. He's up late last night with them. I was up late worrying about mine. That's the horrible part about when they grow. It just changes. They're not up, but you're up thinking about how to help them. But really, I noticed, like, from birth until about 14 years old, that's your most like that. Not that they don't listen in those later teen years. Oh, I always do this.
do kids ever listen? Like you have the older ones. Like, do they ever start listening?
No,
Okay.
probably not until they're
Okay.
not until they're older. And
Okay. Just want to
really,
check.
really, that's kind of what we have been talking about, is like how to create, we don't want to create obedient slaves. We want to create self-driven, directed students. In a lot of ways, that comes with a little bit of pushback, and us learning to work with them, not against them. And I think the traditional school has really taught us how to almost be adversarial with our children, and we're striving to work with them towards their goals. But I think you can do a lot of things, like if you have goals together and they understand your why and they understand the family's why, it does make your life easier as a parent, because you feel like more of a team, for sure. This children's goal sheet, I think, is excellent, has some great ways to help your child jumpstart their year with some great goals for them to look at, as well as the self-driven child. This is actually the podcast that I did with both Will and Ned. And I think it's a great book. It's a great place to start, to trying to figure out how to work with your children, and so that they listen and you'll listen to them. And then we're going to talk about SMART goals this week, or during the session, for sure. We're really going to touch more on that. So the first question to ask is, what's your vision for the new year? Last year was brutal,
Oh
to say the
man.
least.
To say that
So,
very least. Goodness
yeah.
gracious.
And I was going through these sessions, the vision of 2020, a 2020 vision, and I'm glad that is hindsight, that 2020 is hindsight.
Yep.
We did learn a lot of things, but let's think about what that vision is going to be for the new year. And it's hard when, getting back to that reason for freedom, when we really don't know what our government is going to be like, or what things are going to be like. But really, we can only focus on our own immediate family and ourselves the best that we can, and prepare the best that we can. So, how is this year going to look for your family? As I was preparing this, my 13-year-old, sorry, he turned 13 over the break. He was telling me that he thinks this year is going to be the most amazing year, and I'm glad that he's feeling so optimistic about it, because I think that that's something too that we need more of. We need more optimism that we're going to have brighter days ahead instead of worse. Over the last few days, the last few weeks, the last few months, it hasn't seemed super hopeful, especially for people who love freedom. But we really do have the power to change that around, especially starting with ourselves. So trying to kind of tie this back into homeschooling, most of our struggles as homeschoolers are really daily. Those are the questions I get asked the most. I was on the radio with that whole interview, and they were asking like, well, what's a great curriculum? What should you do with your children every day? And really, that's not for me to decide for anybody. But those are the common, like that day-to-day grind is really where most of the struggles come from. But when we take the time and we focus on that big picture to start, it really helps to make all those tiny little daily details fall into place. And so it's really important if our actions always start with why and not what, and then we move to the what with the why, if that makes any sense. Do you have more to add?
No, that's great. I just following it.
Okay. All right. So what do you want for your family's future, I think is a really important question to ask yourself, as well as some of these other questions of why you decided to do this or why this is important to you, why this matters to you. Kind of another thing over the break, and it's really caused me to think, especially some individual things that's going on in our family, as well as questions that I was asked on this radio program, was this whole woke ideology, which maybe we'll touch on a little bit more. But in a lot of ways, it's really frightening. And the reason why it's frightening is that everything about it is so mixed up from what you would like the normal person would think. That what happens is that children don't want to feel like they don't know how to respond to something, and they realize like they can't make a decision without somebody telling them. And that's what scares me most about the woke ideology, is that it's so unnatural that it makes you think, well, I need somebody to tell me what to do. And that would be a big why for me of why I'm doing this, because we want to teach children that to follow that intuition a little bit more, to follow what we already know just by instinct, because I think that's a super important part of education. So Dustin, what is your why? Why did you, because you were in a charter school, you were, you had that school choice going, but what was your why for actually homeschooling?
So it started. You bring up the woke stuff. It's a combination of things. Number one, we pulled our kids out of their charter school here in Garden City last February. The school wasn't taking precautions. I mean, they were taking precautions, but we kind of saw what was coming. So we're like, you know what? We're done. We're going to pull our kids out and we're going to homeschool them. Thank you so much. So it was coronavirus that kind of ignited this shift for us. But the school was also like going like super woke, super, into the diversity stuff, which is fine. By the way, I like diversity as far as it goes, but, I saw lots of posters around some of those, like, I don't even know it's just woke art posters. Right. And they were celebrating like all these diverse people who have done great things. And those people absolutely should be celebrated for their contributions. And maybe we don't do that enough, but there was no celebration of founding fathers ever, not once. And I was just like, maybe we could have some diversity. No. So, and it was just, there was just so much indoctrination going on, and I was super uncomfortable. And then I've just been reading and studying about public schools and how they work and the systems. And what was that?
It just paused. Okay.
There we go.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Apparently my internet connection is unstable, but we're back now. So anyway, I began studying and thinking about public schools and stuff like that. And I just don't like the structure. I don't like the structure. I think they waste a lot of time. I think they restrain kids and control kids. So for example, like my son, he spends a lot of time reading, and that's what he likes to do, which I'm grateful for. But last night we took him to the bookstore. Actually, it was Monday night. We took him to the bookstore, and he just looks at me. He's like, "Dad, I've got this gift card. Do you think they have any books on learning Greek and Roman?" Because he's been reading Percy Jackson. I'm like, man,
Whoa, yeah.
I can barely speak English. Like, I can help you get there, but like, it was just cool because that's what he wanted to do. And he has plenty of time to read that stuff because he's not in school. He's not waiting in line. He's not lining up for the teacher. He's not putting his hands in his lap to do quiet time and all this stuff. We're letting him follow his interests the way that he wants to follow them. And it's paying off. And additionally, there's really good interaction between him and my daughter. They teach each other, and they trade notes, and they trade facts, and I think it's been really good to have those two together. So there's a lot of it right there.
That's awesome. And I love that story, or, the stuff with your son, because we see that when children are allowed to kind of, navigate their own schooling, they actually reach higher than what we ever had in mind for them. And that was always like the thing that shocked me the most, is that I always thought that there needed to be somebody there to tell them what to learn. And we kind of do a hybrid thing in our family. What I'm doing with my youngest one is that we definitely encourage math and reading and writing, those types of things. I have him involved in, I have him involved in history lessons that I feel like complement what we want them to learn about history as well as science. But then he's got most of the day available, and that's what really bothered him when he tried the charter school at one time, is that he realized, like, with that extra time, I could be doing so much more. And they really do push themselves above and beyond what you would ever think. So we're going to kind of talk about why family goal setting will make your job easier as a parent. And we kind of discussed this in the last session, but I think it's good to kind of go over that. Sometimes we mistakenly think that if we set up, family goal setting, that it would just give us a bigger to-do list. And I can't keep up with my own to-do list, let alone. But we're really missing a big picture. Setting family goals transcends that daily slog of family life that makes us feel really run down and overwhelmed. And because we're working together towards common goals, we build a connection with our family that is even stronger. And why does that matter? Because connection breeds cooperation. When you feel like you're part of a team, you tend to cooperate a lot better than when you feel like you're just all individual people working at your own lives and not really have any, things that you're working together. So you can help. It helps build a stronger connection with your kids. It makes them feel like it's safer to talk to you about tough topics. I'm not saying that's always the truth. Like I said, I'm still having issues with teenagers and stuff, but it definitely starts that line of communication. They'll be more willing to jump in and help out. Dustin was asking me if my kids ever really listen, and they have been really good about helping out, when we ask them to do stuff, as far as making dinner or folding laundry, or having some type of, I've been really lucky that way. Maybe that's not the case for many people, but when they're there all the time, they see what you do as a parent, they want to help out in that. So they might even ask the first time you ask them to pick up their toys. And I did, I do like my children to listen to me, just because I've expressed to them so many times that we've got a lot going on our plates, and anytime they can help and they can. So I really did encourage, like, at least respond, when I ask you, so I know that you heard it, even if you're busy doing something else, and you'll get to that, next after you finish that. That's really important, but at least respond. But setting family goals is an excellent way to teach your kids important life skills before they leave the house. And then also how to set a goal and then stick to it until it's done. I think I've been given a lot of crap on, as we've done these sessions, that, I'm just kind of like this willy-nilly things going on. But no, we're teaching them some tenacity and finishing what they started, definitely.
Well, and if I might jump in here,
Mhm.
we found an interesting opportunity. So much of the world and school is like this. If you've ever read Excellent Sheep, people are so interested in just beating each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
Beat each other, get the job, get the money, get everything, get the honor. And I don't want to raise my kids like that. I mean, obviously drive is important, but so is teamwork. Teamwork is incredibly important. And so we have a 2-year-old who's a little bit, it seems like he's behind in speaking a little bit. He does this weird thing where he talks with his mouth closed. I'm not going to give you a retelling of it or a recounting of it. It's not my thing. But anyway, so what we said is, guys, I will pay you each, Lincoln, Holly, I will pay each of you a quarter for every book that you read to Ben. And they were totally cool with that. Um, so my goal there was, number one, have our kids read more, which they do anyway, but read more. Help Ben listen to words and process words and do the stories, but also to show as a family that when we have struggles, when one member of our family has a struggle, we can work together to lift up the other ones. And I think that that's been really
It's really
important for my
powerful.
my other kids to see, because one of my other kids has a problem where he makes a mistake and he just melts down because he just doesn't like making mistakes. I mean, who does? But he needs to see that we're there to lift
He's
him up.
obviously an oldest child, right? I mean, that's how.
There it is. Um, but
Go
but
ahead.
I just want to show that if I make a mistake here at work, yeah, I'm going to pay the consequences, but I'm not going to be shunned. I'm not going to be ostracized. That we can connect and build people up, and it's just something that I've struggled with, and I want to share with my kids.
Yeah, that's great. I love the extra little stories like that. And and to see your kids work together, I think is so powerful. My last child, I didn't have to potty train him or anything. I mean, as soon as I'm like, okay, this is the next step to that, my kids would had taken it off. And the reading to each other and stuff you're teaching them, that's a one room schoolhouse that we've talked about before, that they're learning, your older children are learning how to be leaders, and younger children tend to listen to their siblings better than their parents. And I think if we can foster those good relationships among siblings and then foster that with our children as well, that's going to increase the tightness of that family unit. So when we talk about family learning goal setting, think about some ideas for goals to increase a better experience with family learning for the whole family. That includes the person who's in charge of I mean, sometimes we as parents that are kind of, what is it? Overseeing basically how all of the parts and pieces that kids need to learn, it can be stressful for you as well. And that needs to be taken into consideration. If there's something that you're doing that really, you have it in your mind that, oh, to be a homeschooler I have to do this type of thing, but it's not working for you, definitely rethink that. Try to create a better experience for the whole family. If you're stressed out as a parent trying to make sure you get this big checklist done, it's going to adversely affect the mood in the house and the home, and that's going to affect learning as well. Also, how can you increase family learning in your home, maybe in a natural way? Dustin has shared on the podcast so many amazing events, especially with little kids, about ways to just gently learn some of those things that you want your child to know. And that's really the cool thing about learning with your children at home is, yeah, you start during the day, but then it flows through the rest, or start in the morning, but it flows through the rest of your day. And when you know what your kids are learning, it's really easy to pick it up later in more casual settings as well. And then how can you model family learning? How can you model that learning is important? What are you doing? I know so many parents, they just want to come home, and it kind of is a generational thing for sure. I remember my dad coming home from work, and granted, he worked construction and he was tired and stuff, but I just remember, like, really, it was just coming home, flipping on the TV, which nowadays it's like, holy Hannah,
Yeah,
that's
don't do
not.
that.
Yeah, exactly. Or at our generation, maybe flipping on your computer and spending some time just scrolling through social media. I really do struggle with that myself, of getting wrapped up in just doing what's easiest instead of what's best. And so we really want to think about that model for family learning. When I chastise my children for being online too much, I have to really think about, like, what have I done to show them that that's, not okay just in my personal action. Kids definitely, more is caught than taught, for sure. So here's the plan of success. We kind of talked about this last time, those steps to goal setting. This is a great way of like teaching your kids these things. And this is one thing I talked to David Gronowski on the radio. I think the most important thing we can teach our children, instead of like what curriculum to use or whatever, is how to set goals and how to accomplish those things that we want to do. I think is the most important life skill. It's going to help them throughout their whole life. And unfortunately, so many of us are just used to being told what to do. Like this year, we're going to learn this and whatever. And I think it becomes where we stop thinking for ourselves. But when we really start having other goals, it's, having our own personal goals, it's really powerful in leading our own lives. Sometimes you have to define what a goal is. And to a little kid, it's so easy. They really grasp onto these ideas really well. But defining and what a goal is to them. Share your own goals and aspirations. My oldest son, so I was in the middle of figure competing. I think I've told this story before, but
Wait, what?
yeah, well, I've done a little bit of, I love to weightlift and do things like
Oh,
that.
okay, right,
And
okay.
yeah, figure competing. Anyway, and I was worried, like I was taking so much time doing this on my own. My podcast has been the same. I spent a lot of time, like I have my own loves and interests that I like to do. But I have found that that has been very inspirational for my own children to watch me, like, okay, this is mom's goal and this is how she finished it, and be sure to share those things with your kids. I think they find that super powerful, and then they start thinking, well, what do I want to do? And I've seen it happen, and it can happen so naturally. Help your kids create that dream list of what they see in their future. I really think that we all come here with some kind of a mission or some kind of way that we're blessed to help the world around us, and kids will come up with that all on their own. I think that's really important, and be open as a parent to let that change. That's probably, if your child is saying at 3 he wants to be a firefighter, most likely by the time he's a senior in high school, that's going to change. But it's really fun for kids to always have a dream list. Also, make sure that you're tailoring your goals to your child, or they're actually doing their goals. You're not doing their goals for them. Help your child think through the steps of success, as well as like where they might get hung up on, and if they get hung up on it, it's really powerful to go back and like, oh, well, how can we make this different? How can this change? I think the habits book, what is that? Atomic Habits, is really powerful in that, not seeing, like not completing a goal as a failure, like thinking, okay, what was stood in my way? What was a barrier? And then trying to remove those barriers, I think is really important, and will be a lifelong skill for your kids. And then help them track their goals and celebrate goals, for your family goals, the success of those, as well as the individual. That's one thing I found in homeschooling, that there's not enough like, oh, wow, this is awesome. Because you'll see your kids complete stuff, and it's just like there's no last day homeschooling, or not homeschooling, but no last day parties or something, with
Right.
big bells and whistles going off. But make sure you do that as a family. That also builds that connectiveness when we celebrate each other's successes, for sure.
I'm going to, don't tell, she's probably not watching this broadcast, but also if you're a spouse of the homeschool, like I do the work here, my wife does the work at home, maybe hold a special teacher appreciation day for your spouse. That could be
That's
fun
awesome.
too, but
Yes.
don't tell my wife
Well,
I'm doing that.
and if you're watching this and you want to homeschool, but you can't because you're the person that's working. I've had a lot of husbands come to me and like, or, anyway, how do I get my wife to homeschool? And you really, unless you're willing to, like Dustin says, take some of that responsibility on, take a day where she has time to get out of the house and have time to think of her own things, and that you make sure that that person who has the brunt of the responsibility has time to accomplish their own goals, and that sometimes comes with extra help, for sure. So that's awesome, Dustin. So let's talk about what SMART goals are. This is really important to teach our children because this is, I think, a key to being successful. But SMART goals, or SMART, is an acronym that helps us guide us through our goal setting, and it makes sure that our goals are clear, reachable, clear and reachable. We should be specific. They should be measurable. They should be something that's actually achievable. Like if I said, well, I want to actually live on another planet. I've actually heard so many people say that they're ready to move to another planet, but it's probably not completely achievable right now. Something that's relevant, and then also time bound. I really find that time bound, that's really important because it helps us be more mindful, when we're tracking our time in our goals, for sure, and that helps us be more successful. So how to use the SMART, how to use this for our best advantage, definitely be specific. Our goals should be clear and specific. Sometimes you have to write it out just almost word for word of what you're thinking. You can't do like a line, like that's just 2 or 3 words, because sometimes that doesn't get to the nitty gritty of what's going to be needed to make that successful. So be really specific so that you're able to focus on the efforts and feel like you can be truly motivated to achieve that. When you draft your goals, try to have those W questions like, what would I want to accomplish? Why is this goal important? Who is involved? Sometimes when we set goals with other people involved, I'm trying to start a podcast for my husband's business, and sometimes that's hard, when you're working with somebody else who's involved, and you might want to ask those questions. Where is it going to be located? What kind of resources do I need that might limit that involvement? Make sure that they're measurable. It's important to have a measurable goal so you can actually track your progress, because sometimes I know diet and exercise is a big one. If you don't take, photos, or if you don't weigh yourself regularly, or you don't realize the progress that you're making, and then you become very discouraged. And that's a way, if you can track your progress, to stay motivated. Assessing progress helps you stay focused, meeting your deadlines. That feeling of excitement when you're getting closer to achieving your goal is so much more, realized when it's something that's measurable. And measurable goals answer the question like, how much, how many, how will I know when I've accomplished it? Also make it achievable. The third part is the A, make it achievable. Your goals also need to be realistic and attainable to be successful. So in other words, you want to stretch your abilities, but you also want it to remain within that possibility. Another reason why to love Atomic Habits is he actually talks like sometimes to make it achievable, like let's say that you're not exercising at the moment. And maybe what you have to do is just one tiny little thing. Like today, I'm just gonna, walk to the end of my street or something like that. Just something very small that, is, can be achievable. But as we move through that, the parts that we can achieve, it helps us to be able to accomplish more. So good questions to ask is, how can I accomplish this goal? How realistic is this goal based on, those other constraints? And sometimes that's financial. Sometimes it's just time, the time limit. Those can be those kinds of goals. I've seen people do some really incredible stuff, though, with very little time. And in fact, very busy people tend to accomplish more because they have to, be really wise about using that time. That's why I've talked so much about that Pomodoro technique, or the, what's the other one that I've used a lot? Do you remember?
I
From
don't.
our other
I
session?
do like the Pomodoro one. As somebody
Yeah,
with
the
ADD,
Pomodoro.
it's a lifesaver.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It helps you focus on just that small block of time for sure. Okay. Make sure your goals are relevant. That's the fourth step. This step is about ensuring that your goals matter to you and that they align with, kind of that why. If you're just doing a goal because everybody else is doing it, most likely you're not going to be very successful at it. The less successful we are about achieving our goals, the less likely we're to set other ones. Um, and if we keep it relevant, it helps us to achieve, it has, be responsible or retain that control over them so that we're responsible for them. Make sure that your plans drive everybody forward. And some great questions to ask yourself for relevant is, does this seem worthwhile to me? Is this the right time? Especially if you're homeschooling your kids, you may have a goal to write a book, but maybe say you have a newborn, sometimes you have to wait until the time is right. And the time does become right as sometime. Does this match other efforts or needs that I have? Maybe you have other needs that really need to become before this particular goal. Am I the right person to reach this goal? Or what do I need? What kind of character traits do I need to complete this goal? Is this applicable in our current social economic environment? I hope that doesn't become a factor, but I already know in my own personal life that has for sure. And so we've got to, really be. I think sometimes when we don't have all the resources, what that gives us, is a chance to be creative. And so, just really think outside the box sometimes if it's that social economic environment. And then also time bound. Every goal needs a target date. So you need a deadline to focus and something to work towards. And I think that that's really what will help you. What are those daily tasks that can give you priority over a long-term goal? And sometimes it's just really like, I always want to learn a language. I mean, maybe it comes down to like just making sure that's one of, or having a time for it or something like that. But the problem is if I don't set that time bound thing. And I love Atomic Habits again.
Read
I
that.
actually have,
Seriously, read that book.
yeah,
If you want to get started on changing your life, read Atomic Habits. Number
yeah.
one self-help book of all time, except for maybe Seven Habits.
Well, and the cool thing about, so I actually have the Atomic Habit Journal. My son got it for me last year, and unfortunately, I didn't use it to its fullest extent. But this year, I'm actually using it. One of the cool things that he does is like he has at the very back, it has these tiny little check marks of like these little tiny things that you can do every day to complete that goal. And I really think that helps with that time bound thing, because it helps us and it helps track that progress and how often you did it. Some great questions to ask yourself for this one is when can I do, or what can I do 6 months from now or 6 weeks from now, and really set like a time frame. And I think you're more successful when you do that. It helps you be more mindful. I say that a lot, but I think it's true, like using every day to mindfully accomplish those goals. And then what can you do today to just get a little bit closer to that goal? Dustin, I told you I was gonna call on you a lot. Do you have any new goals for this year? Oh,
Yeah.
whoops.
No,
Sorry.
my big goal I think is to continue my weight loss, which is
Mhm.
fantastic.
Yeah, you've done awesome with that.
Yeah, I've lost as of this morning, I was 55 pounds. My dad and I are going first one to 80 wins, and I think my brother's at 75. So as we're doing it together as a group, kind of, and we actually just kind of all found our way there.
That's
It wasn't
awesome.
planned, right? But and it was cool because the stuff that you're talking about is exactly how I got there, which is I eased myself into it. I do intermittent fasting where I only eat from 12 to 6. But I ease myself into it. I think I started at like 12 to 8. And then, I would just go slowly for the first few weeks. And then amped it up, narrowed the time, changed how I ate, stuff like that. So that's my big one. And then, just spend more time. This is not time bound. It's not defined. It's not. I just want to spend more time with my kids and my wife. That's my big goal. And obviously I have work goals that I want to achieve and projects I want to do, but there's just so much I want to do. It's going to be a better new year.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's smart, that last question of what are some things that you want to change. In scouting, we're always taught that start, stop, continue. And every day, if you can ask yourself that question, like, what do I need to start doing to be better at this goal? What do I need to stop doing to be better at this goal? And what do I need to continue doing to be to make this effective. And I think that's kind of what you're showing us, is that you kind of always have to be reevaluating. It's not just like you're going to set this goal and it's just going to work out perfectly. You're going to kind of have to weave back and forth to try to get, to that destination eventually. And I think we forget that a lot too, that there's that process of trying to make it work for
Yeah.
ourselves in a better way.
Yeah.
So
And I would say, for me and for everybody else, I mean, I've been thinking about advertising a lot because that's a big part of my job. And there's so much that we do so much on impulse because marketers want us to, right? They want us to react with our feelings so that we buy their product. We
definitely.
we eat on impulse. We buy books on impulse. We buy crap off Amazon that we don't need on impulse. So I think just being very, very present and also grabbing for that second marshmallow. That's something my wife and I talk about all the time, which is, if you understand the Stanford marshmallow study, which is they put kindergartners, I think they were kindergartners, in a room, and they said you can have one. What was it? They said,
Well, if you wait so long, you get
yeah,
a
yeah,
second one.
that's right.
But that was a really hard thing for those little
Yeah.
kids to do.
Yeah, and so I'm trying to teach myself to find the deeper joy in, suffering through going without, or doing hard things, so that I get a better result on the other side of that suffering, or that challenge or whatever. So I'm not doing that justice, but really just listening to yourself, listening to your impulses, and trying to figure out who is trying to influence you into doing what, because we're
Mhm.
so programmed by marketers. It's terrible. Just be present and see if your decisions are really in your best interest. I mean, and override your feelings sometimes and just stick it
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Well, and I think 2020, if one thing that we can learn, at least one thing that I learned, is that because there was all this like chaos going on, it really did derail me from my goals. Some of it was because I couldn't leave my house, so that made it hard. And then I sat and whined and complained about it for a little while, and did that kind of thing. But if you stay kind of focused on, okay, so I have this barrier in front of me now. How am I going to make that change? And I really don't see that changing for 2021. I hate to be less hopeful, but we have a little bit of experience with that now, right? So let's take what we've learned from 2020 and really learn to like be more flexible and still find ways of making it happen. So my years ago, my husband and I were on a journey to get out of debt, and when we stopped going, okay, debt is on the table. Well, once we pulled debt off the table, all of a sudden we got really creative about how we were going to make our dreams and our goals happen. And the cool thing is like, I don't know, we are completely debt free at this point, even our house.
Nice.
And
Nice
yeah,
work.
and we're in our mid 40s, which is awesome. And so it's allowing us now to really accomplish our dreams and our goals. When my husband lost his job, that was really frustrating for us, but we already had like things we wanted to be doing, things that we want to have done, and who knows if we'll get there. But it's interesting. It was just interesting to me, like once you pull off like, okay, that's no longer on the table, you get a lot more creative. And I think that that's what we're going to see, social media being blocked for some people, and that kind of thing. We're just going to find people getting creative, and as Americans, I think that's just in our blood to do so. So just really think about that. How can I be the most creative? I told Dustin at the very end I was going to really plug this. We're just starting into another legislative session. I was teasing the host of the radio show program that I was on. He hates the words "the Great Reset." We're hearing that so often, that this is a great reset, and it really causes a lot of our freedom loving shackles to go up. But really, we need a great reset, right? If we want to have greater freedom. So let's take that and think about that in education. This is a perfect time to rethink what we're doing in education. And really, some of the only ways we're going to do that is if we get our funds back. basically, or if we get more choices, or if we get more opportunities. I mentioned that woke ideology that's going to really be pushed a lot. That's what we've been basically promised by a Biden administration, and that critical race theory in school. I would definitely encourage you, and maybe I'll put this, I need to make a note of it, really encourage you to study what that theory is about. It might open your eyes, because I'm a pretty I'm a pretty broad thinker. There's a lot of, I love different types of thought. I love to think about new ways of how to do something, but it wasn't until I really learned what the ideology is. It's somewhat, it's frightening in a lot of ways. But a great place to go is a person, his name is James Lindsay, and him and he co-authored a book called How to Have Impossible Conversations, but he actually has a website called New Discourses, and he has a podcast. He sometimes can use some very flowery language, but the stuff he really helps to open your eyes about what that woke ideology is about. He actually started off almost fighting against Ted Cruz because he didn't want religion to be introduced into school. But then when he got involved, he realized wow, there's a whole nother more powerful religion on the other side that's even more ingrained in just, I don't know how to even describe it, but from what he thought, what he was fighting against, actually, he found out that the side he was taking was almost, was worse in a lot of ways. But let's start in our own homes. Let's start with what we can do. And the thing that we can do the best is with our own children. Notice how your children are learning. How is this coronavirus impacting and affecting them? It's hurting students in so much many ways than I'd like to even think. My last child spent a little bit of time in one of those crazy classrooms with the plexiglass and the mask and all of that stuff. And it is just, it's not healthy in a lot of ways. And so we really have to think about what's the ways that they're learning best? How are they being stifled and hurt in their education? And then make sure your legislature knows. There are a lot of powerful lobbyists in education. It is a money making machine for a lot of people. They will say it's not, but curriculum companies, teachers unions, there's a lot of money and power to be gained in education. And unfortunately, that affects you as a parent, it affects your family, and more importantly, it affects your children. And so really, that's my big plug. Get involved with what's going on, particularly in education, hopefully in all facets of your local government. I think that's the best way to make any change. It's all done locally. We need some decentralization, right, Dustin?
Absolutely.
Of what's going on.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you want to add?
No,
you have this legislative thing going on now.
There are two things. I think the wokeism, it's destructive, it's toxic, and it should be repudiated and destroyed completely. It will never be destroyed because you can't really kill an idea necessarily, but we should stamp it out every place we can. There's a project that we're working on. I can't talk about it right now, but it destroyed it's working on destroying somebody's livelihood because they believe differently, and from the woke crowd. And it's disgusting because there's no room for conversation. There's no room for nuance. There's no room for understanding, tolerance, empathy, love, communication. There's none of that. It's just, you're either this or you're that. And if you're that, we will destroy you. There's no discussion. We will destroy you. So if you see that in your kid's school, first of all, let me know. Dustin at IdahoFreedom.org. We want to be able to report on that because it's something that needs to be discussed. But yeah, that stuff needs to go away, and you need to just expose that wherever you see it. Now, a lot of people will say, well, you guys are against diversity. Absolutely not. I want every person, gay, straight, trans, black, white, Mexican, Hispanic, I guess it's the same thing. Every color, every race, every ethnicity, everything, to have equality before the law and to thrive in the way that they see fit. I want them to realize the American dream 100%. But I also want to have compassionate conversations with these folks to understand their lives. And wokeism won't get us there. It just won't. It can't. It doesn't. Because we judge people based on the color of their skin. And if you're white, you're bad. And if you're not, well, you're oppressed, and government needs to fix life for you. Now, there have been injustices in the past, and we can't get into all that today, but the way that we're going about fixing it just isn't the right way to do it. But I would also say there is a big chance for a leap forward on school choice this year. I can't say all the details, but there's people working on a funding thing for school choice, and some people may not want to participate because they don't want the government involved or whatever, and I totally respect that. But others, especially people who are new to homeschooling because of coronavirus, could use the help and could use the tax dollars that were allotted to their kids to do homeschool or to do private school or to do whatever, to do micro learning, whatever. So there's a really big chance for that this year. So call your lawmakers, be respectful, be civil, but just say, hey, I know that there's school choice legislation coming down the pipe. I would really appreciate it if you would share or vote for that or support that and help craft that to help my family. They need those calls, especially the calls when they get so many form emails. I mean, there's thousands being poured into their email inboxes every single day. Take the time, make the call. We live in Idaho. It's great because we can access our legislators. Not everybody can do that. We can, and we should absolutely do it every chance we get. So again, I'll get off my soapbox, but there's so much at stake this legislative session, and I don't think anybody realizes the gravity and the weight of what's going to happen and what could happen and the opportunity we have before us. So please take it.
Yes. Well, and I did want to talk about too, we talk about I think the thing that I find so damning about the woke ideology and the critical race theory is the introduction of force and violence and threats and that kind of thing. And sometimes when we're butted up against that, we want to respond the same way. It's part of our mimetic part of humans. But as free people, we need to rethink how we're going to change that. I know, I hear conservatives all the time say this country was founded on violence, but I can definitely guarantee you that anybody who wants freedom more than likely, especially in this kind of situation, is going to find their freedom stripped from them whenever they use violence. And I don't find it a very useful way of making change in a lot of ways, is to return violence for violence. I think that's the difference, right? We're better than that. We think above, we think broad. We're not group thinkers. Free people are individual thinkers who care about one another in a very compassionate way, like Dustin was saying. And I think that requires, like I said, to be kind of an out of the box thinker. Really spend some time pondering about that, how to move ideas forward, how to move ideas of freedom forward in a loving and kind, and you're going to get farther that way, in my personal opinion. But I'm sorry, I had to say that because of violence that we've seen lately.
Yeah, I'm so sick of it. I'm with
Exactly.
you. I endorse everything you say.
Exactly. All right. Well, next week, we're definitely going to have another session. It's going to be, so Wednesday, the 20th, we're going to talk about how to enjoy that learning process, because a lot of people think of homeschooling as going to the dentist or getting your teeth pulled. But we're going to talk about how to make it an actual enjoyable process. So that's what we'll be discussing. I hope that you'll join us then. Go to, and I didn't put the website, but the luminousmind.net is where you can click to join it. You may have to scroll down a little bit. I'm trying to figure out how to move it up to the top, but it is a post, and you will see Empowered Learning 101 that's sponsored by the Freedom Action. Freedom Action, Idaho Freedom Action is late there on my website. Yeah. Anyway, so be sure to join us.
Awesome. Thank you for your time, Rebecca, and we'll see everybody next week.